So I wanted to talk about something that essentially has bugged me for a while when it comes to criticism within content. Now, if you have been paying attention, there basically was a big old expose done on Rotten Tomatoes, or where essentially a lot of people came to the understanding that Rotten Tomatoes has basically been a veritable uh, kind of a bad site to go to where generally review scores have been skewed to fit to gain favor with certain studios and companies and whatnot. And essentially Rotten Tomatoes itself is owned by two of the big five movie studios, and it is ran by a bunch of people whom had used to work for Disney, which is another one of the big five. So that's three of the big five studios basically running a website that is used to validate and to assure people that content is good or fresh, as the Rotten Tomatoes likes to put it. And realistically, this is something that upon getting exposed, a lot of people were like, oh my God, oh my God. But more sensible people were like, no shit. Rotten Tomatoes for years has basically had ridiculous reviews, scores, and ratings and whatnot. But the more astounding aspect upon this discovery that has been done has been essentially people's understanding of what's been going on, whether it's been people diving in even deeper into it. I highly recommend looking at an upper echelon video that he did. That was really cool. Uh, that was a good one. Talking about the Rotten Tomatoes thing, and essentially rather than just a bunch of people just kind of going and be like, well, I knew Rotten Tomatoes did, I know Rotten Tomatoes did and whatnot, and you having those same people use Rotten Tomatoes as a rating system for a general appeal for a lot of things, and then upon learning about this information, still use Rotten Tomatoes. And again, it's like, how ridiculous does shit have to get for you to understand, or for you to like just put yourself in this realm of thinking to where it's like, maybe, just maybe, I probably shouldn't use this site as a reference anymore. It's like, I probably shouldn't go to this for a reference. I understand that you need something, like some people need something. Some people need some type of reference, some people need, but again, that's kind of where the rule of critics in general came from. Roger and Ebert, two thumbs up, two thumbs down. That came, that was something that people used. This is before my time, but I know the person because of the references from so many different movies and stuff. But Gene Shalit, that was another person. He was a critic that people listened to when it came to different criticisms. You understand the person behind the critique, which helps you understand exactly what it is that you're getting into. And being someone who has looked into so many movies and TV shows and things like that, well, you see me doing it now, I became a critic. And with those critiques and whatnot, I'm also creative, and so I write and draw and shit like that. But with that understanding of stuff, I didn't need Rotten Tomatoes to confirm or deny anything. I saw a movie based on the fact that I thought it was interesting, or the premise seemed like cool or fun to me. Hell, I don't like horror movies, but I've seen horror movies. Sometimes there's a horror movie with a premise that is like, I might buckle down and get spooked just to see this movie because it seems like it might be really interesting. And lo and behold, there are a few horror movies out there that I still relegate, like I'll still talk about to this day, and it's like, it was actually a pretty good movie. It's like, this part happened, it freaked me out, but it's like, I don't like the notion of paying to get scared. I can walk to my car in the middle of the night just fine, thank you, just fine, free of charge. It's absolutely free. But you see where I'm getting at when it's like the ridiculousness of the hypocrisy that comes from critiques or critics, or just a general understanding of trying to judge and allocate stuff. I get that, it's okay to have a reference, that having these numbers confirm and deny certain aspects of stuff, but also understanding that these numbers have been altered, messed with, or basically are completely false should kind of change your perspective on how it is that you view and see and look at movies. Look at One Piece, for an example. The live action that came out on Netflix is something that I, to this day, talk about as bad, because it is bad. It's a bad show. But by the spectrum of what Rotten Tomatoes has done, so many people are being like, oh, it's so great, it's so good, it's so good. But is it not, but it's like, is it also not a fact that we know Rotten Tomatoes happens to change their rating system when it comes to looking at stuff? So exactly how can you trust that rating system for something when a lot of people essentially have done videos praising One Piece and using Rotten Tomatoes, and then they later come out with a video that then talks about how Rotten Tomatoes has been fudging their numbers in order to make certain shows look good, other shows look bad, and whatever? Does that not come with some type of conscious concept of, hey, maybe I should just judge this on the merit of what it is that I think, or what it is that I'm talking about, or what it is that I'm seeing? And that also I have an issue with, and it's like, yeah, I'm asking for that. But the main thing that I'm asking for from that is also to judge things fairly. And not essentially just to be, I'm not saying like, oh, like look at everything with an open mind or coming at it with a, it's like, I would expect you to want to do that upon looking at something or viewing it or whatever. But I feel as if, there are certain people out there who critique one thing, you say one thing, and they do one thing, and they go all in when it comes to certain aspects of media. Particular is a lot of people that I look at that essentially that do critiques, and a lot of them happen to be essentially like Star Wars fans. I personally am not a Star Wars fan. I'm not a Star Wars fan. I said fans with S. I know a lot about Star Wars because it is deeply rooted into pop culture. I've seen all the movies, and to understand a hell of a lot of shit that basically came on Robot Chicken, I watched Star Wars. But I've seen all the movies, and it was never my thing. I didn't grow up in a household with people who like Star Wars. I wasn't born in an era where Star Wars was the big thing that a kid needed to see. So it was never anything that crossed my radar. And then upon me actually seeing it, it wasn't anything special. And like a lot of people who essentially are my age, I actually saw the episode 1, 2, and 3 first before I even seen 4, 5, and 6. But I know a lot of information about Star Wars. The stuff within Star Wars, the lore itself, is very interesting to me. I adore the game Force Unleashed 1 and 2. Those games are great. I think they're fantastic. There's just so much stuff that comes. Like I actually really want to play the KOTOR remake. Heard nothing but great things about that game. I hope that if that game actually is somewhat good, that I would get to experience that game. Didn't have an Xbox when I was growing up, so yeah, it's stuff like that that actually intrigues me about the world of Star Wars. But I'm not a fan of those movies or the things that they've done. And then what Disney has done after purchasing the rights to Star Wars have been brutal towards the movies. And it's something where it's like, being someone who isn't a fan looking from the outside looking in, it's like, Jesus Christ, why did you let them butcher them like that? And it's like, I didn't like you at first, but now you're the devil. You're just the devil. Ew, that's gross. What the fuck is a Rey? And why is she Super Jesus? The Force doesn't work that way. Like, I'm not even a fan, but I still can look at this and generally give my opinion about it when engaging in it and talking about it. And it's like, yeah, I don't like Star Wars. And I'll let that be a full disclosure, whether or not that's something that you take to heart or you don't in terms of listening to me talk about the thing. But it's like, hey, I'm not a fan of Star Wars, but I'll openly critique and talk about stuff. There are things and elements within the movies that I very much enjoy that are still good or whatnot, or still like, cinematic wise or cinematography. Hell, the prequel, the fight scenes and the music that went along with the fight scenes were some of the most interesting and engaging moments that I've had with being involved in Star Wars. But again, I still look at the series as a whole and I'm like, meh. But I was like, hell, but I still like that, like those moments and whatnot, and I'll still give credit where credit is due. But that's essentially what I'm advocating. And it's like, boy, it took forever to get there. But just give credit where credit is due, or understand exactly what it is that I'm looking at, and evaluate it fairly. To look at it with the same attentiveness, with the same, yeah, attentiveness or attention that I would give something that I generally cherish and care for, like Spider-Man movies, for example. I I look at this stuff, and I come at it with that same approach. And it's like, hey, I care. You know, I care about continuity. I care about characters. I care about story development. I care. These are things that essentially are important to me whenever I'm looking at something. So when I'm trying to put a value and I'm critiquing something, I come at it with the exact same gumption that I would with something that I truly want to see, with something that I don't really care to see at all. And because of that, I feel as if that should be the bare minimum that someone that is a critic would possibly do. Now, with the whole Rotten Tomatoes bullshit, it's like, again, for years, you knew critics were full of shit. I mean, like, we've had multiple times where critics basically talked about the fact that they were either getting paid under the table by studios to say good things, and this is like long before Rotten Tomatoes existed, but this shit has been going on with critics for years. But it's like, you know, they would get either paid under the table, or to not jeopardize their own job or their livelihood by being a critic that's allowed to see movies when they first come out, and so that way people click on their links and look at their web pages when they give a review or whatnot. They tend to puff up the movies and whatnot a little bit to give it a nice review rather than a scathing one. That way people will go see it, and because of that, you sometimes get shit that obviously should not have been or shouldn't be, or good or considered good, or talked about in a positive light, as things that later on, you know, as a collective, people were like, that's a terrible movie. It was like, right. But what you probably don't know is that at the time, Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 98% fresh score. Why the fuck would they do that? I don't know. It's a bad movie. But as they did to the different the Star Wars sequels that Disney released, and it's like, those movies are generally bad movies. Like, they don't make sense. It's like they're just bad movies. They're poorly put together. You can destroy their plot by throwing a rock. They've actually done that within some of the movies. They go against their own rules, their own regulations, and it's just all over the place. But essentially, you have it to where it's like, well, why is it that these things are given such positive reviews and positive scores? And it's like, yeah, because they're fucking, they're manipulating you through lies. But it's not like we've only seen this through movies. Metacritic. If you don't remember, with Death Stranding, there was a huge incident with the game Death Stranding on Metacritic, where people went through and they looked at the Metacritic reviews and ratings and scores for the game, and you essentially had a bunch of people in the write negative reviews for it, and they were essentially botted. And that people were looking and they were checking and they were saying like, oh, all of these like comments under these reviews are exactly the same. Almost as if someone took a bot and they just made like hundreds and hundreds of negative reviews for this game just to give it a bad score. And it's like, that's fucked up. But then they also found out that they did that for positive reviews. And then and when Metacritic found out about the negative reviews, they took them all down to change the score for Death Stranding to be appropriate, to match exactly who it is that's actually engaging. And you can tell these aren't bots. These are actually people who've played the game or are engaged with the game, and they wanted to give a review. But then when it came towards the positive reviews, they didn't remove them. And it was like, these are botted reviews also. You need to remove those as well. And they, nah. And it's like, well, that obviously must be fair. It ain't got nothing to do with the fact that Kojima's in bed with Sony, as well as he happens to be good friends with Jeff Keighley, who's running all the award shows and stuff that happens to deal with video games at the time. Those things don't correlate whatsoever. And it's like, just taking a step back and understanding, yeah, a lot of this stuff is full of shit. It helps the process of understanding that, yeah, maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't use these things to delegate or to put us in, like, to let us understand exactly what is what. It's fine to have a buffer for something, you know, that's fine. But at the same token, I feel that people should be far more accepting in terms of finding someone that they trust to give a good review. Someone that basically, has the same wants and needs when it comes to movies, video games, or what have you. And, you find them and like this, it's their job to look at this stuff, to talk about this stuff. And it's like, that's something that you would like before you even decide to purchase, or hell, like I hate when a game is just only nothing but trailers and there's no gameplay. Cause it's like, I don't know what it is I'm getting, and then essentially go by the rule of no game, no hype. So then it's like, I don't care what the next Assassin's Creed is supposed to be about. If I don't see gameplay, who cares? Because it's probably going to be Ubisoft boring, and it always is. So, whatever with that. So I essentially just dislike the fact, like going back to One Piece, I dislike the fact that I've seen so many people praise this show. And they've praised this show for just existing outside of the spectrum of what Cowboy Bebop was. Which, I'll give credit to that. Yeah, it didn't butcher itself like Cowboy Bebop did, which was really bad. But then also, upon listening to certain people give it good praises and whatnot, I then come to a certain understanding. It's like, well, half of these people actually seen Cowboy Bebop. So then their distaste for this show was very much justified because you know what the source material is. But then going into One Piece, you know nothing, next to nothing. So then upon looking at the source material, you were interested, you were generally like brought in by what it is that you were seeing, and you were interested in it. You liked it. You liked the characters and stuff like that. So that's fine. And even I, despite the fact that I can't stand the show, gave positive feedback towards the things that deserved the positive feedback. The actor who plays Luffy, for example, was fucking phenomenal. Perfect in terms of playing Luffy. Only weak aspect of his character was when the story just didn't make any sense. When they just had to push the plot along by having whatever happen. When realistically, what he was doing was fine, but then they would just kind of trip over itself in order to make the circumstances happen so that the story can continue, when realistically, it didn't make any sense. And my argument towards the people who essentially are singing it praises and whatnot, and it's like, yeah, you didn't see the anime, you're not reading the manga, fine, that's fine. But the exact same freaking, checking it with the magnifying glass aspect you have towards anything Star Wars related. That like people are tearing apart the Ahsoka show, like just every fucking frame. They like, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. That same attention to detail, I would appreciate it if you had that towards the One Piece show. Not just singing it praises because of the fact that it's not Cowboy Bebop, or you heard something about them working with the creator, which doesn't really match up with what exactly they've been doing with what actually happened in the show. Or if you actually seen the source material, you would probably ponder, how the fuck did they get this past the creator when these things don't play out this way, nor do they work within this story. All of that aside, even if you put that aside, just the general dialogue, the acting, some of the story, some of the concepts within the story, the plot points that go on, a lot of that stuff is actually bad. It's done poorly. It is not good. So why aren't you criticizing that? Why aren't you critiquing that? I can understand if you brought it up, but you was like, it's something you can easily ignore that, or you don't find it as offensive as I do, or anything like that. But I'm not hearing anyone actually give critiques to these moments that generally don't make sense. You have two characters that go around constantly saying that they want nothing to do with pirates, yet they're following a guy who claims he's a pirate. But there's nothing that you did to serve towards that purpose of them actually wanting to be around this person. You didn't do anything. But because I know One Piece and I know that the story is supposed to flow this way, you have a lot of people who essentially, from the outside looking in, because of the fact that they don't know anything about the source material or whatnot, they assume, because this is kind of what I got the feel off of the Critical Drinkers review for One Piece, and it's like, you're assuming some of the weird ass aspects of this show, or the things that don't really kind of connect, makes sense because of it only makes sense because you don't know what the anime does. And it's like, I would challenge you to just watch the anime, because then you would see that this actually, it just doesn't make sense. It's not because the world is weird, it's because this has bad writing in it. So if you looked at the anime, you would understand, oh, that's why that does that to do that to do that. Then why the fuck in the show did it do that? I don't know. And it's like, now it doesn't make sense. At first it was excusable because you don't know. But now it's not excusable because you do know. And so that's essentially one of the things that I'm mainly upset about, is the fact that I've been seeing, and it's not that people's review of it has been positive. It's the fact that people's review of it has been something to where it's like, wait a minute, I know for a fact some of these people are the type of people that do deep dives into show, and when the smallest mistake happens, they're like, well, you done fucked up your whole story because that one thing basically ruins everything. I've seen people review movies and TV shows like that. And I've seen shows that have had those problems, and seen movies and TV shows that have had those problems. But I'm not seeing people actually incorporate that within certain forms of media when it suits them to essentially give it praise, because the competitor, or because what else that their other content or media that's out essentially just doesn't have certain elements that this one does have. So it's like, we can sing this praises, but fuck that content over there. And that's wrong to me. That's upsetting to me. I don't like that. I don't like the fact that people approach media like that. I feel that it's like, you should judge this shit fairly on all accounts, not because it happens to not be woke garbage, or it happens to not showcase or highlight this stuff. Hell, that fucking happened with the Kong versus Godzilla movie. I keep saying Godzilla versus Kong movie. Why do I put him first? Godzilla versus Kong movie. The Godzilla versus Kong movie is a god-awful movie. That's a bad movie. It's a terrible movie. But so many people sung it praises just because it did well, because of the fact that people just wanted to sit down and look at a dumb movie. But it was like, hey, we're tired of the woke stuff. We're tired of seeing all this stuff, talking down to people and whatnot. This movie made money because of the fact that it was just a dumb movie you could turn your brain off to and look at. That's fine. And it's like, I understand that, but that doesn't mean that this movie is now elevated, because that stuff has basically devalued the movies you have been currently watching. That's not how standards work. Your standards should be constant. They should remain at a constant. They should not be lowered or raised depending upon the subject matter that you're looking at. That's what it's a standard. It remains here. Your line is here. So whatever content that you're looking at has to incorporate or encroach on that line in order for it to value in some way, whether it miss your standards by a little bit or whether it exceeds your standards. That's how that fucking works. But I get so bogged down by seeing so many people, and hell, I might be a victim of it as well, because it's like, hey, and no one is perfect, but it is something that I do not like. And so by all means, if you see me doing it, please call me out on it, but it is something that I do not like. I don't like compromising a standard simply because of the situation or the subject matter itself. I like Godzilla. I like Godzilla movies. I couldn't stand Godzilla vs. Kong. It was a bad movie. But yet I've seen people praise it. And the entire time I'm listening to so many people praise it and talk about how great the movie was, I just couldn't help but notice. I was like, is anyone going to bring up the fucking story? Is anyone going to bring up the characters? Is anyone going to bring up the plot points that don't make sense? No, it's just the fact that it's not woke. That's not a reason for this movie to be good. That's not a valid reason to say that this is a good movie. Because then, after history has passed, and then when the woke shit is gone and we just have movies, and people look back at this movie and they go, why the fuck did people like this movie so much? I guess during that time, it was just really fucking stupid. Rather than, well, what they said about it was that it was an okay movie, but it did really well because during the time, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's it. That's fine. Which led to a different era of movies because blah, 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 blah. They were just overwhelmed with a bunch of dumb shit preaching at them, and it didn't make any sense. Like the last season of Doctor Who. Weird shit. It's just weird shit. So they changed it. So they got, they changed it. And it's like they wouldn't spend their money on it, but the reviews of it do talk about these bad aspects of it. They reviewed it and rated it accordingly. in terms of those aspects of the movie, but it did well despite those things because of situation at that time. It has nothing to do with people giving it a positive review or positive content because of that. And it's like, no, that's just why it was successful. Similar to the Captain Marvel thing. You know, Captain Marvel made $1 billion. Captain Marvel's a terrible movie. Can you not agree that Captain Marvel's a terrible movie? So don't follow me on this being a perfect example of what it is that I'm talking about. Captain Marvel made $1 billion. It's a terrible movie, but it was sandwiched in between two of Marvel's biggest movies of all motherfucking time. Infinity War and Endgame. You saw Infinity War, and when Infinity War ended, it highlighted and showcased Captain Marvel as a thing that is supposedly important. And so many people went to go see that movie because they thought if they didn't, they were going to miss out on a huge key element that was necessary for Endgame. The biggest thing to hit theaters in years. And it turns out it wasn't. It turns out it was a boring piece of shit, lackluster, dumbass movie, real stupid. And the only thing that they did with Carol Danvers was have her pop up in the beginning, and then she popped up at the end, making everything dumb. It retconned so much shit, made so many elements of characters stupid, just dumb. It was just dumb. But Rotten Tomatoes gave it a really good score. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a high fucking score. The movie itself was woke as all outdoors. Dumb as hell. Female empowerment, not girl power. Girl power and female empowerment, two totally different things. You want to know what girl power is? Watch the Spice Girls movie. But had all of those elements in it that you would essentially would say bad aspects to put into a movie if you want people to generally sit down and look at your movie. But it made $1 billion. Is that not a success as far as the studio is concerned? Yes, it is. But is that something that people should actually view or like within their media? No, it isn't, because they didn't. But for what it did at that time, it was a genius move. Let's put this piece of shit out right now. Put this shit out in between these two pieces of bread while they hungry, and tell them you better eat that shit sandwich. And they can gobble it up. And so, does that not perfectly? That's like a perfect example for what it is that I'm talking about. You just have all these elements just working together that kind of just fuck over that general concept of what was happening within the MCU. But look at how much people critique that movie, and it was justifiably right. This is a bad movie. This didn't make sense. This didn't make sense. This was bad. This was bad. Why did they do this? Why did they do that? The acting was terrible. The action was bad. Special effects was weird. What the hell is going on? This is something during the biggest moment when Marvel's been doing nothing but making movies. So why is this so lame? Why is this so bad? This is the last fucking movie Stan Lee is in. What the fuck? But do you not see that essentially there is some weird hypocrisy when it comes to a lot of people who are reviewing stuff that I wish would stop. I wish it would end, and essentially we just get to people actually reviewing things. Because again, when going back to Critical Drinker, it's like I like watching Critical Drinker stuff. His reviews are pretty cool to me. I don't agree with everything that he says, but it's like his reviews are very well done as far as I'm concerned. And then for like, it ain't no long overbearing thing like I do, but they're short and sweet. It's like, I wish I could do that, but nah, it's easier for me to just ramble on and then just kind of upload it than it is for me to edit shit. But, here we are. But essentially, it's something that, was like a lot of the talking points that he brought up about the One Piece show was far more, to me, enveloped with his disdain for the Cowboy Bebop show and how bad that was. And then it was like the praise that you're giving to One Piece has absolutely nothing to do with the show, but rather than the fact that the show itself was just made in accordance to this. But then it was like the stuff that you said about the show was very, very lackluster. It was a shell of what it is that was like, well, You're saying you was excited for the next episode, but I know for a fact you're someone who, you literally recently had a video doing a deep dive into what the fuck a lightsaber would do to somebody if they were stabbed with it. And you watch this and I know it has plot holes and you just ignored them. It's like you didn't bring that up as a bad thing about the show. Instead, you made it seem as if the negative reason to look at this show would only be because you're not into Japanese stuff. But that doesn't even make sense with what One Piece is, because it's not heavily Japanese oriented. Or even if you're going with the storytelling elements that the Japanese have with an anime and manga. But again, that's not really something that's there within the show. That's just what One Piece is or what anime is. But that's not something that scares away people from looking at content. It's much like with Star Wars. It's like if you don't like sci-fi, you probably wouldn't look at Star Wars. But that's not really... Like, not to say that it's a bad set of movies, it's sci-fi. So, but it's like, that's such a broad, general term, and it's like, I know that there's more negative things that you can say about this. It's like, and I know you probably noticed this negative stuff, but why aren't you bringing it up? Why is the fact that this is just better, just like, I would say, done in a realm that's better than Cowboy Bebop to you, the main focus? I can't wrap my mind around the fact that there's so many people who do shit like this when it comes to reviews, critiques, and things like that. Because it doesn't seem fair to me. It doesn't seem authentic. It doesn't seem appropriate. It doesn't seem right. But again, that's just my outlook on that. But I just really wanted to talk about that because of the fact that it's like, yeah, it's kind of been bothering me. And then with the whole Rotten Tomatoes thing blowing up, it's like, yeah, seeing so many people now talk about it, it's like, what are you, late to the party? You knew this shit was crap years ago. Again, they gave Captain Marvel good reviews. And then they started to keep doing shit too. What was it? Damn, it was something that they changed on the site because of Captain Marvel. I can't remember. No, yeah, you could actually put whether or not you were interested in a movie on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know if you remember that. Like it could gauge and tell, like, by people looking at something and being like, how many people are interested in seeing this movie, how many aren't. And then upon Captain Marvel actually coming out, they removed that. And then they just gave it nothing but high positive scores and shit like that. Crazy website that people to this day still use. And it's like, none of those red flags stuck out to you as, maybe I probably shouldn't use this site. Because I don't use that site. I don't go to Rotten Tomatoes for shit. Hell, it's annoying when I look up movies at AMC Theater and then they have a Rotten Tomatoes score on there. And it's like, I'm supposed to go see this tomorrow. Why the fuck does it have a rating? It's like, the fuck? Why is that on AMC? Why do you need this? Damn it. But I guess that just makes me crazy. But that's all I wanted to talk about. Go away now. That's fucking stupid. I don't want to do that. Oh, no. Do my own thing. This has been another episode of Fun with Flame. I've been your host, Danieltheflame. As always, good people. Hope you have fun.